Every once in a while, there's a word or a term that comes across my desk that kind of plants itself firmly in my mind. And maybe about, I think it was when COVID started to happen and President Trump was putting some of his ideas out into the world, that the term othering came up. It was in an article somewhere, and it planted itself so deeply in my mind. So, the general definition is that it's a process of viewing or treating someone as fundamentally other based on, you name it, ethnicity, religion, sexuality, disability, species, status. And from that, it leads to exclusion, marginalization, the sense of inferiority, even violence, because we now are imputing wrongness, unworthiness, inferiority, all kinds of exaggerations and superimpositions on whatever group that we have put into this othering category, going for all the differences. There's no sameness in this conversation, in this construct. It's all about differences. And this is what human beings and living beings do. I mean, we other all the time. Turkeys other, but they don't do it the same way as we do because they don't have the smarts that we have to be able to do it much more creatively than, let's say, turkeys or birds or, yellow jackets do. When I read the definition, I said to myself, this is one of, if not the most prevalent machination or strategies of the self-grasping ignorance and the self-centered thought that brings the greatest obstacle to our peace in the world and causes the greatest misery. I mean, it just kind of landed in my mind like, this is it. This is it. And that the Buddha's teachings, explaining and describing the Four Noble Truths, lays this out very plainly on what are the causes of othering from a Dharma viewpoint. Now, there are a lot of people in the world right now that are looking at this, which is a good thing. They don't have any Dharma framework. They say that the problem of the 21st century is othering. And it's not that this is a phenomenon that's just arisen in the minds of human beings in the past century or two. This has been going on since beginningless time because we've had this self-centered thought and the self-grasping ignorance, right? But it's drawing a certain level of attention by historians, political scientists, psychologists, sociologists, because it's just so in our face all the time. And they're trying to be a little bit more clear about what the causes are and trying to identify it and to deal with it. And that they say that the problems of othering in the world, this world seems to be just continually running into these challenges, this suffering, these conflicts, and that they say that the research already has shown that every global, national, and regional conflict is wrapped within or organized around one or more of these aspects of othering. This is how it all starts. It's pervasive in the human mind, these conflicts that are happening in the world. And this came to the forefront for me recently because during the Democratic National Convention last week, one of the themes and a lot of the speeches that I heard was this passionate plea to address this kind of thinking, to work on mitigating this othering that we do with each other. That there is to counter with a sense of belonging, which is its ultimate countermeasure, which is another whole conversation, and that everyone is entitled just by being who they are for the share of wealth, the share of opportunity, to have a voice in the process of what it means to be an American citizen, and to be able to participate in and enjoy the fruits of our collective labors. And this is like totally antithetical to this othering. So I started to unpack this in my mind within the context of what the sociologists say and what the Dharma can say about it. Because my gut sense, because of the self-grasping ignorance, the self-centered thought, and the polluted karma, and without the Dharma and its framework of the Four Noble Truths, the causes from othering don't go deep enough. They can't get down there. And to some extent, solving it is going to be hard. I mean, the experts, these very sincere, brilliant minds are working on this, and they've got a whole list. I'm going to share some of the things they say cause this othering. But without dependent arising, without emptiness, without a lot of Dharma understandings, they're only going to be able to get so far. And that the conditions, there are a lot that make othering strategies more likely. And so I wanted to share what, the fundamental understandings that they have that are way up on the surface here, not down where we can go and try to understand this at a deeper level. So first, just to look at the process in regards to othering, how the mind, under the control of these erroneous thoughts, the self, here we go, the self that's permanent, solid, set up from its own side, self-powered, independent, and in charge, or craves to be in charge, and wants what it wants when it wants it. I mean, the teaching is just so apparent. Therefore, it needs to be protected, catered to, indulged, and defended from the others that also exist permanently, solidly, set up from their own side, and also think they're in charge. And then here we go, the struggle begins in the mind due to the self-grasping that plays itself out like this. And this erroneous thinking then, as we have heard, and we try to recognize in our own minds, is that we think this I is special and that it deserves special treatment. If it doesn't get what it wants, it gets really pissed off. And our default reaction then is to look outward, to find an external enemy for our unhappiness, demonizing them, wishing to harm or undermine them in some way to keep them away from what we have, what we want, because they don't deserve it, they haven't earned it, and besides, it's mine. And that the self-grasping ignorance and self-centered thought, we've already getting a tiny little glimpse of how embedded, how insidious this is, and how familiar it is that we don't even recognize it's in play. And we're Dharma practitioners. We've got this as a tool. We've got this as a contemplation, a reflection, a study to understand what the causes of this form of dukkha is. So there is a book that came out this year. It's called Belonging Without Othering. It's by John A. Powell and Stephen Menendian. There's an institute in California called the Belonging Institute that's actually trying to address this at their level of expertise. And so they have examples of othering in this book, what they understand to be the fundamental causes for all this misery in our world. Because othering does not arise in a vacuum. Dharma-wise, we know, dependent arising, causes and conditions, polluted karma. They've got a little bit of that in their understanding. So I want to share some of the causes and conditions they say that are causing this othering that is bringing so much misery and horrific tragedy to our world right now. The first one is the infamous demagogue who makes use of popular prejudices, false claims, and promises in order to gain power. We can name them. We've got 8 or 9, 10 of them running the show in certain countries around this world, or trying to get in charge of countries around this world. They unravel the constitutional limits. They take generalized discontent, the mood of a country that's just feeling a little bit adrift because there's been so many changes, economic shakiness post-COVID, just a general global exhaustion, and they exploit it. And they insist on a course of action that does not have to be sensible. And in many times it's extremely simplistic, but they promise to deliver to the masses freedom from all that's bothering them. And then what happens is, and we see this as well, where the struggle starts, is that it becomes apparent that they have no intention of benefiting the masses. They're going to fill their pocketbooks, they're going to fill the pocketbooks of their friends. And when some people realize that and speak out, then the marginalization starts, the demonization starts, the imprisonment and the threats start, and the suffering ensues. There's a whole sort of program with demagogues and autocrats and dictators. It works consistently. This is the way in which they gain power and keep it going. The second thing that stirs the pot, according to the folks that are tracking this, is a fear of demographic change. This is a really powerful enabling condition for othering because it sees as an existential threat, even more than the fear of crime, the fear of material and physical insecurity, is to see the change of the demographics in your country. They call it the majority with a minority complex. Replacement theory, constituted by a group in power because they see threats to their ideology, their wealth, mostly non-existent. A lot of this stuff is made up. There's nothing going on in the world. They're just making this stuff up. And they rant about annihilation to all that you hold dear. We're being threatened. Everything that we love, everything we care for is going to be taken away from us. And we can make a list of this, Myanmar, the Rohingyas, Modi with the Muslims, the Irish Protestants and Catholics, Uyghurs, Chinese, Nazis with Jews, US with Japanese Americans, Indian tribes. Human family just does this. When things start to shift, the people in power get scared. The third one that the sociologists say that has been a really powerful political shift that made the othering so rise to the top of the surface was when the political entities shift. And there are two big ones in that particular century before and now in this one, is that after World War I, in 1919, the Versailles Treaty, its terms absolutely humiliated Germany. It was very punitive. It was very punishing. And the post-war saw a rise in unemployment, political instability, confusion, a country adrift trying to re-identify itself. Well, guess who shows up? Adolf Hitler. Exploiting the people's fears, their frustrations, offering simple solutions, and the main problem was the Jews. Then later in 1991, the collapse of the Soviet Union. I had no idea about this. I don't know where I was in 1991, but I wasn't tracking this. Is that with the collapse of the Soviet Union, all of it was perceived, its status, its political and global clout was lost. It was like a trauma. The USSR was then broken into 5 republics. It just totally disintegrated into 5 who were also trying to figure out who they were, figure out, how to live as democracies, how to do what they wanted to do. And guess who took advantage of that, saying that this was a historic tragedy? Mr. Putin. Instead of releasing an oppressed people that had been under the thumb of Lenin, Stalin, the czars for centuries, he said they were victims of an aggressive West, especially the United States. So he built the country back up on just driving the fear and the sense that we deserve our history, we deserve our power back, we deserve our identities back. And then just climate, environmental changes. A quarter of all the ethnically fueled conflicts in our world are coinciding with droughts, famines, floods, tornadoes. They kind of coincide, get people really afraid, and somebody comes in and says, I'll fix it. So, so this is what the sociologists, the political historians are saying. These are the driving causes of a lot of this othering mechanism in our minds. And we see that our minds are so powerful, and that if we don't trust our own reasoning and logic, our own experience, our own Dharma wisdom, you see, this is from the Dharma viewpoint, we ourselves will be vulnerable to the ever-changing tides of the world's events. We'll get into despair, we'll feel discouraged, we'll feel hopeless. The Dharma helps us to develop wisdom, compassion, and discrimination that is crucial in knowing, okay, what kind of mind or what kind of thinking do I need to abandon? What kind of mind and thinking do I need to adopt, including my views, my ideals, my ideologies, my beliefs? Do they align with reality? It's so much deeper, the way to hold all of this unsettledness in the world right now. And to be very aware that the self-grasping ignorance and the self-centered thought are in every one of us in this community as well. It tries to convince us, tells all sorts of lies on who we think we are, who needs to get their way, who is getting their way, who is seen as an enemy. I see it in myself. When I disagree with somebody or somebody points out my misbehavior, I don't get what I want, I impute motivations on a member of the community who's just trying to be honest with me, it's real easy for me to find some sort of enemy outside myself. I just watch the mind just play the story. So it not only plays out on the world stage, it plays out in community. It plays out each and every one of us. So this is still in my mind very strongly because I want to see for myself, to understand the Four Noble Truths, to understand the disadvantages of cyclic existence, the importance of compassion in my own life, the foundation for understanding and having a bigger lens to see the world as it goes through these trials and tribulations. It takes a lot of work. It takes time. Here we are with the most precious tools of the Dharma, and othering is still just outside our door, just outside my mind's door when I run into my attachment, like getting what it wants. And then the countermeasure, which is belonging, which is deeper and more vast than equanimity, more deeper and vast than just inclusion. And the second half of this book, Belonging Without Othering, talks about what this is. And that would include, it has a multitude of causes because it arises with causes just like othering does, is once again, can emptiness help us understand what belonging means? Can dependent arising? Can bodhicitta? The 7-point cause and effect instruction. Okay, so belonging, which is deeper and more vast than equanimity, inclusion, requires us to go deeply into our practice on the method side of the path, which is to say that 7-point cause and effect, equalizing, exchanging self and others are wonderful tools to be able to cultivate the mind of belonging. All the wishes and themes in the convention, to bring them into our own practice and say, how can I bring this sense of belonging? Not just in my community when I have difficulty with somebody, but above and beyond that. And then to incorporate any understanding we have of emptiness, dependent arising, the disadvantages of cyclic existence. The Buddha gave us everything to be able to deal with this mind that is willing to kill somebody. That the self-grasping ignorance and the self-centered thought need to be identified, dismantled, and the Buddha has given us some of the most wonderful tools on the planet to be able to deal with the othering inside our own minds, and then to teach and to share whatever wisdom we have to help others to dismantle and identify the othering within their own minds. And bodhicitta is the driving force on the method side. Emptiness of inherent existence is the driving force on the wisdom side. I may think about doing belonging, which is a beautiful concept all unto itself, that they also want to share the causes and conditions in our world for belonging and how that can be cultivated and where the Dharma plays its role in this beautiful state of mind as a sentient being who wishes to become a Buddha in order to be the greatest benefit, the greatest benefit.